Look, by way of introduction, Phil O'Donoghue, I'm a director here at Unqork, and I focus primarily all on private assets. So this is really exciting to see so many of you here. For those who don't know, we started focusing on private assets 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And so for many of us, this is the first time we're meeting you face to face, which is exciting. The second thing that's exciting, you don't know? The second thing that's exciting is that this is the first time as a group we're actually bringing you all together. And I cannot tell you how many meetings we've had where we say, or the questions asked us of, what's everyone else doing, right? How are they using us? Are they similar to us? And so the session today is really to answer that question. What is everyone else doing? Where are they driving the most impact? What do those applications look like? And then coming out of this, we're looking at this as the first meeting of many that we want to bring this community together and start facilitating some of these conversations, right? There's a lot of common denominators in these applications that we're building. And so we want to make sure that we're not just the bottleneck between myself and Paul, but that we're also enabling you to connect to each other and just talk through what are you doing as well. And so quickly,
I was just going to say it's pretty amazing because in the market, I said in the market out there is some firms who spend and invest a lot of time in their investment data. Right? There's others who work and focus and done amazing things on the investor. There's other we're thinking about how we launch a fund. The key thing in this industry is people want to share information, get together, share solutions because let's be honest, you're making got money and everything else, technology to bring it up to the level you need. People want to share information. So today we're going to give you a quick maybe overview of some of the things we've seen. But we're going to do a session hopefully with an investor relations team, with tech teams, how do you set up center of excellence, how do you structure a team, one maybe with the finance function. I know Deirdre is great, wants to bring all the admins together and do a bit of a session. So the other thing we're going to talk about today is how does Unqork invest? What do we build for you? Is it case management solution, or is it something more, solution like ESOP docs, fund setup? Is there different ways we can help you as, our network of clients to work together? So really excited.
I'm Odile Aslan. I'm a solution engineering manager. I've been at Unqork for 2.5 years. I focus primarily on our financial services industry, so I built a number of applications, in this space, including, some of the applications that you'll see today. And what we'll do after, Phil shows you a couple of applications is that we're actually going to dive to the back end of the platform, and you'll show how an application, a pixel-perfect application, can be fully realized in just a matter of minutes.
So just background to this very quickly. I think, again, great to have so many clients here. The key thing for us is we've had so many great meetings with probably every CTO of the big private funds out there. And again, we want to be able to, I suppose, help bring solutions together, bring innovation into a market. There's been great progress made in certain areas like point solutions. They work to a certain extent, but all your businesses are different by asset class, by investor type. The expansion into wealth is a huge one. So I think what we want to do is take those 50 app deployments we've probably done, and a lot of them have probably been done where it's, a client did it for them, they did it once and it worked well for them, but how do we now get that network together and share it across a broader market? So we're going to talk about that a little bit and show some demos as well of the solutions we think we may automate and bring it out in the market as well. So Phil, from a demo perspective, I think we were going to talk a little bit client lifecycle, move into ops, and then talk about for the future some of the things we're seeing. We're going to do a session later on blockchain enabled tokenized fund with one of our partners, so we'll talk about that a little bit and frame it up for the next session.
Okay, great. Yeah, and look, as when we were preparing for the session, we were looking across all of our particular clients, all of the prospects we've been talking to, some of the people who actually invest in our firm, and really what we were looking at was where are the primary areas of focus that we see in terms of where people turn to Unqork. And the first one that we're going to look at is just the client lifecycle, right? Ed talked about this in the last session quite a bit, but how do we actually optimize the client experience? Because as we noted in the last session, there is a number of different demands that are coming from your limited partners, and we see some trends where people are going into private wealth, where those demands aren't limited partners, they're retail clients, right? There's expectations that you have to set. The second one is around the operations automation. So again, really looking at some of the things that Deirdre was talking about in the last session. How do we actually unify data silos across the board? How do we actually bring that into certain processes and mitigate risk with some of those workflows? And the last is just mobilizing for the future. So a number of firms have come to us and said, look, there's key trends that are coming our way. Private wealth being a good one, ESG being another. The security demo we're going to see in the next session as well on crypto and a fund tokenization platform. Those are things where people are coming to us and saying we can capitalize on certain opportunities or we can prepare ourselves for certain things that are going to be coming down the line our way. And so what we're going to do is we're going to walk through a couple front-end demos just to highlight those top two. And then Odile is going to turn over and we're going to go through one of the ESG frameworks that have really recently come out, gained a lot of traction, and she's going to build it in if we give you enough time, 20 minutes, right? Yeah, usually we give her 4 minutes at the end of demos, but I think we're going to try to get her a little more time. So with that, I'm going to just investment ops, sure. Sure.
So again, just to frame it up, again, when you think about investment operations, again, the challenging thing in alternatives specifically is every asset class under the sun, everyone diversifies to create alpha, creates new fund structures. There's been huge inflows, but that becomes an operational absolute nightmare to manage, right? So I think what we're going to show here is, and Deirdre talked about it a little bit, and this is, again, just our view and our point of view on how you could take a multi-asset class manager, has a lot of different investments and structured data, and uses a lot of service providers, by the way, who may do things a different way, deliver data. And how do you bring that in, which has been entirely Excel-driven historically, and probably done 90% of the market by Excel. How do you bring it into a digital framework to actually automate the review of that, process controls in a more structured manner, and then parse that information to whoever needs it, including clients who at the end of the day are the demanding, or who you're serving. So this is, again, high level and something that, again, we may focus on this year. This is like our 1-2 week view of how something could look like, but we'd love to hear from you all. Is this the type of thing you'd like to see Unqork invest in next year? Phil, maybe just walk through a couple of the screens.
Yeah, I think the important thing here, and Dan talked about in the last one, is just the UI, UX, even if it's just an end user as your employee, right? So what we're looking at here is just a couple quick bar charts to understand, what files have we actually received from the administrator, and that's getting updated in real time. And one of the important things to note is it's also being dependent upon some of the SLAs that you can put in place, right? It's great that you get a trial balance from your admin, but if you're getting it 10 days too late, that's something that you actually want to flag, follow up some of those exceptions, and make sure that there's a reach out to your particular admin. Secondly is, really when you start to ingest the data, what does that experience look like from your standpoint if you're trying to get to an exception-based review? So, we talked a lot about controls. I think Deirdre had thrown out 300 to 600,000, somewhere in that range. But really what you're looking at is to say, I want to customize those rules and ensure that we're getting a high level of data integrity, and then we can kick those out. So for instance, if I just click in here and just understand that we want to look at any sort of portfolio company that moved plus or minus by 20% after we've ingested that file from the 10% after we've ingested that file from the admin. We can understand that Pied Piper has moved by 14.67%. And then we can also start to collaborate internally, right? We can actually add some of those commentaries in it so we can work within that framework and understand who we need to escalate that to and kick off workflows as a result. I think the last point just on this one that's really important is what you can do in the data once it's actually in there, right? And what's really fascinating is that this is for a period in time, but once you get to a certain amount of data, you can start to see trends with it that you can facilitate and extrapolate out of the data set. So we can understand what's the revenue that we're seeing over time, what's the investor activity over time, and really once we bring it in there, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of how you can play with the data.
And Phil, just to add, I think for a multi-asset business, they're typically run as 4 or 5 like silos historically, different accounting systems. But again, structuring some of the data and bringing it in, you can take your business into one place and really look at like some of that efficiency and scale. Like I'm going to call Brookfield, for example, one of the most diverse asset managers, like 5 different asset classes. But again, to bring that together into one data set, like the power of that from a reporting perspective, looking at your investors together, all those types of things you can enable with this, it just really changes your business, right? So, and I know there's a lot of managers here, and everyone has kind of their nuances around how they do different fund structures, systems, but bringing it into a central place is really powerful, as you can see here.
Great, so the next one I'm just going to quickly flash is deal onboarding. And Dan actually, I forget if we mentioned this in a prep session or one they had before, but in many cases, particularly with private assets, we see people use a system like a Deal Cloud or a Salesforce, where they're actually sourcing the data, but it gets to a point where you actually need to start to memorialize the data and actually bring in the workflow where you're bringing your legal team, your operations team, your compliance team. And one of the great things about Unqork is actually that workflow engine and the dynamicism that you have behind it. So in this case, we're pulling data down from our sourcing agent, let's say it's Deal Cloud, and we're bringing it into our workflow. And what we're going to see next is that we're actually going to be checking the path that we can actually outline for this deal to go through, right? So if I were to say, you know what, it's a growth deal or it's a credit deal, we're going to actually change the workflow because we know that the steps for those different asset classes may be different. Similarly, if I go growth and I say, you know what, we actually want to have an ESG due diligence questionnaire to add on top of that due diligence process, we can do that as well, and that's going to alter the entire workflow going forward. Once you go from there, then you're actually looking at what does the actual deal team look like, maybe pulled in, but then we can make assignments internally so we can understand what is the workload going to look like, who's actually going to be partaking in this deal. And when we get into more of the dashboards and visibility, similar to what we saw on NAV, it's really powerful to understand transparency across all of our applications is key, and just understanding who is working on what, where's the task outlined with each of these, and so that when we understand looking at a summary view, you know, where are we in the process, and who needs to take the next step to move this forward, or maybe possibly disqualify. Are we on time? Okay. All right.
And again, just on this one again. Like private investments, you take on a new company, right? Unqork, for example, or you take on a new infrastructure project. The diversity in the investment classes are huge, but again, you have a framework where you can say this applies, but this doesn't. You know, it's powerful to be able to automate something while handling the complexity of your business. You know, historically in the past, you're going to do something for private equity, you're going to do something for credit. This is entirely different. I think this just allows you, again, how do we do it more universally? Can we bring our teams together? Capture the data that's required, but also, you know, again, not put up disparate siloed systems with different data and try to handle the complexity that way. So again, this gives you the power, and I'd love to hear from everyone if this is something we should think about productizing, where it will work across different asset classes. We'd love to hear from you. Again, these are just demo assets we put together just to show the art of the possible, not fully baked client solutions, but if this is something we should do with our partners, we'd love to hear from you.
You know, you think about this, we talked about in the last session the evolution of like what's next, what's coming. We've talked to multiple firms, we said, look, this is for the pre-investment, we're going to lead up to the IC vote. And then there's middle office applications like the one that Brookfield talked about later, where, okay, now that we've actually signed off on it, we actually need to fund this particular investment. How do we actually get the approvals and workflow? So you think about that as just one continuous flow in terms of how you can build it out. And then it starts to just grow and grow and becomes, your return on investment becomes higher and higher and higher. So that was just at least two examples of investment operations. Again, there's a lot more that we could probably demo these for days, but and in some cases with you we have. But on the portal side, I want to move over to the client lifecycle. And I wanted to start with the portal. And the real key thing here is that there's probably 4 reasons why people come to us around the client lifecycle, and particularly a portal. The first is just the ability to have a unified client experience. And so when you think about what is it that we need to bubble up to the actual investor, the flexibility to bring in data from multiple sources to the investor is critical and has been completely lacking with a lot of point solutions. Most point solutions have been kind of a bolt-on to an accounting system, portfolio management system. But in this example, we can see portfolio data is coming in from our assets allocation. We can see we can bring in ESG scores that may be coming from our research team, market commentary, and then even drilling down into certain mandates and funds. You can see, you can play with the data, understand what's the strategy, who's the portfolio manager, what are the documents tied to that fund as well. So So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what you're able to bring in, and bring it in a very clean UI, UX that's going to speak to the investor and make it very easy for them to navigate. The second thing that I think is probably bigger than all that is actually the self-service aspect of the client lifecycle in Unqork. So if we just think about, if I'm an investor, I'm a limited partner, I can come in and actually kick off workflows that then start on your side. So it's not that someone's putting something in and you're getting an email with an Excel spreadsheet. I can say, look, from a transaction standpoint, I actually want to kick something out and initiate a certain workflow to my IR team or the admin. I can also start to set up meetings with an integration of teams and say, look, I want to set up a meeting with Jane, and we can start to kick that off as well. But there's no bigger self-service flow that is more important and more impactful than onboarding. And so again, thinking about that unified view, a lot of times there's point solutions for a portal, there might be point solutions for an onboarding flow. The fact that we can bring in LPs and say, here's all your portfolio information, here's all your calls to action from an onboarding standpoint, here's your data room, you're pointing them to one particular spot. And so if we think through just clicking into a call to action on one of the flows, you're going to actually start to see a lot of those themes that were mentioned by Ed and them on the panel earlier, of just saying, hey, we're trying to digitize this to accelerate the dollars in the door. We don't want to have multiple weeks going back and forth, and we actually want to bring some transparency both for ourselves and the investor, so that as you move through the flow, if you look over on the left, you'll see that things can start to alter. If I click individual, we'll see individual and IRA section get enabled. I can move back down to pension, that gets enabled, and we can say on the principal places of business, let's say we're on USA, I can put in France, and then all of a sudden that starts to populate as well. And you start to tie in different aspects to that subscription. Your data integrity is going to be significantly higher. You're able to invite collaborators, relationships, wiring instructions to that subscription throughout the process, and it really accelerates getting that onboarding flow from a matter of multiple weeks to a matter of a few days.
Right. And I think all of these, I think it's great seeing, the front end of this looks okay, or the way we want to do things. Again, that becomes fully up to our client how they want to do it. But I think where Odile's going to come in is, again, taking something that's new to the industry, like ESG reporting, and has highest levels of transparency. How do we actually build something, right? It's great to show this and, do this, but like the real power here is we can get a solution, bring it to market really quickly. I think just to round off on all the things Phil talked about, these are all the things we hear about day in, day out from our clients. Investor relations talk about the unified experience like all the time. They're like, our clients are calling me. They're like, we have to go and get different, reports from different systems, bring it all together. It's very labor intensive when you're distributing into wealth, especially in new client bases. So we're going to do a full breakout on that, talk about everything we've seen and done. Deirdre talked earlier at length about finance and NAV and admin oversight. Again, huge things you can do when you change the interaction model. We're going to do a breakout, and probably one of the more exciting ones as well is with technology teams. Again, it's great doing these and having point solutions, but like how do we, so we're going to set them up, and hopefully would love for some of you to participate. But the rest of the session, we just want to focus a little bit more on, like, if you do want to create something, how do we do it? A real industry problem, it's ESG, a framework, like can we build it? And Odile put you under pressure for 12 minutes.
Yeah, I'll just to frame it up a bit more, and I do want to reiterate our thoughts around just 2023 and beyond. We've got a very good foundation of private asset clients. We want to bring this to a much more formalized co-op of just understanding what is going to drive the impact from your standpoint, where can we make an investment, and so starting in Q1, we're going to try to break that out over particular sessions. And in this next session with Odile, what we're looking at is the EDCI, the ESG Data Convergence Initiative. And is anyone part of the ES? Okay, that was a trick question. I know that multiple of you are on the EDCI signatory list, but this is started by Carlyle and CalPERS last September in 2021. And what I really like about this is they've had a lot of adoption from both the GPs and the LP side. It's been a collaborative effort across each of those. And one of the things that they really started with was a simple model, right? They actually just looked at 15 data points because they didn't want to overburden their portfolio companies. And they really wanted to build a benchmark across all the firms that gets anonymized so they can understand things that are measurable and actionable. It goes back to that old mantra of you can't manage what you can't measure. And so it's a very simple model, but you can understand from
any GP standpoint, if you have 100 GPs or 100 portfolio companies, you have 15 data points. Now you're at 1,500 data points. You get each new data points every single quarter. It starts to add up very quickly.